Amen.
Okay, we'll start with the Tillim. For the Yidden of Yisrael, we should see the complete victory of Yidden, the complete total collapse and gone. The enemy's power should be totally gone. Lam Natseach Mizmor David. Yancha Adonai b'yom tzara, Yisagev Hashem Elohei Yaakov. Yishlach Ezecha mikodesh u'mitzion yisadeka. Yizkar kol menchusecha v'oilos v'yitash nesela. Yitin l'chachel b'avecha kol atzoscha imalei. Rana v'shuvasecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgud. Imala Adonai kol mashal yisecha. Ata yidaiti yeshir ne Mashiach. Yarnei mashmei kodshe. B'gvuras yesha yemina. Eila Barechev, Eila Basusim, Anachon B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazki. Heima Korov Nafalu, Anachon Kamna Banasega, Adonai Yeshia Amalach Yaneinu V'Yem Kareinu.
Good morning. Rabbi Majeski, in this class, a lot of students go to shop. In that class, it's only 2. Why did we change the room?
It looks like the room is what makes the difference.
Yeah, I guess so.
Not the teacher, not the content, just the room. Okay. So yesterday we were learning about the Indian of the avodah, that sometimes you do an avodah where you're screaming at your Yetzer Hara. We explained yesterday, doesn't mean literally screaming out loud. First of all, it means internally. And second of all, what it means is a certain avodah. There's a difference between talking and explaining and screaming. Screaming is basically, screaming is considered abuse. If a person screams at their spouse, at a friend, at a parent, or even a parent at a child, screaming is like beating them, just in a different way. Because when I told you, there's an expression, when you was that in this class, maybe it was the other Prokyova's class, when you talk to me. Now, when you scream at me, I hear you. When you talk to me, I listen. It's very simple. When you scream, the person doesn't hear the content of what you're saying. What they hear is the loud voice, and it's like you're just hitting them over the head. When you speak regularly, gently, softly, but not screaming, then they listen to the question, the answer, the explanation, the content, and so on. So sometimes with our Yetzer Hara, it's not about explaining, and the reason is because the Yetzer Hara, or the Nefesh Bahamis, is so immersed in the taiva, in the emotion, in the midas, that, like you said, there's 2 possibilities. One possibility is that as a result of that, he doesn't even hear what you're saying. It's not that it doesn't make sense, he doesn't even hear you because he's so into his emotions. And the second possibility is that he hears you, but because he's so emotional, it doesn't register. It's like you're talking, but it doesn't connect. So therefore, we need something. We use a term like he says to hit, but we use a term like to shock the Nefesh Bahamas. And in other words, to use something strong. And the purpose of that is just to pay attention, like to shake him off the time that he's so invested into. And once he gets a little bit out of that, then he could hear what you're saying. It's like somebody would be inside, in the water, and you can talk to them and they don't hear you because they're diving in the water. They're underneath the water. If they take them out of the water, now their ears are open, they can even hear what you're saying. So the Nefesh Bahamas is so immersed in the Teves. So sometimes we find, and that's what Alter Rebbe says, you scream at the Yetzer and tell him, you're this and you're that, and you're repulsive and you're disgusting, and what kind of language is that? It's a language to break the tie of the Nefesh Bahamas, like to wake him up and to be able to wake him up and sort of pull him out of the trance that he's got himself into through the emotional trip that he's into. And there's a story in Gemara, and that's probably part of the meaning of that story, that there was once one of the Tanoim, he saw a person, I don't know if it's a Gemara or a Medrash, he saw a person, and he said to him, I never saw such an ugly person in my life. So the person was, like, of course, beside himself, and he was angry at him. It's a long story until eventually he taught him, or this Tana taught him and helped him improve himself. The Rebbe explains this wasn't talking about physical ugliness. Of course, that would be offensive to tell somebody such a thing, and it's the opposite of Ahavas Yisrael. This was a person that is what he said. I never saw such an ugly person in my life. Means that he was so filled and so unfortunately into Klippa that he couldn't find anything good in him. Oh, I forgot the Iker. So he said to him, if I'm so ugly, go to the one that created me. In other words, if you say that I'm ugly, that means you're offending the one who created me, that he did a bad job. And eventually that led to good results. So the Rebbe explained what he meant to say was, if Hashem created me, then you can't say that I'm ugly. And if you do, you're offending the one who created me. It was about ruchnius. He saw in him that unfortunately he was in such a place where there was nothing positive there, coolly negative. And he wanted him to come to do tshuva. So he told him these words, that I never saw such an ugly person in my life. Naturally, the person was felt like he was hit, with something very strong. So he wanted to defend himself. And how did he defend himself? He said, yeah, but there's something good about me. I was created by Hashem. If I was created by Hashem, it can't be that there's nothing in me that's godly and that's good. In other words, by him saying those harsh words, it brought out in the other person an awareness of the good that's in him, and that helped him transform. But if he would have said it just in a nice, explaining way, he wouldn't hear what he's saying. He had to say something which was like I said, a shock treatment, something that would shake him up.
Rabbi Majeski, but it's still not polite to say the person that.
It's not polite, but sometimes somebody's drowning and you do something not polite and you save them from the water, it's the right thing to do. If he saw that he's in a place where spiritually he's destroying his life, so he did something that needed to save him. I once read a story, there was a shliach in Peru, there was Rabbi Blumenfeld, and he had this thing that he had a little flyer he'd give out every week, like every shliach with some Dvar Torah. But he decided what he would do is open up Igros Kodesh every week. Every letter usually has something there, a thought, a question, an answer, an explanation. So he'd take that letter, whatever it spoke about, and he would print it. That would be but he would always put it into this flyer. One week he opened it up, and it's a letter the Rebbe writing, I don't know if it was to the person or to the family or to a rabbi, but the Rebbe writes that to tell this person that if they intermarry, they should know that they're helping the Nazis do what they wanted to accomplish. And his first reaction was, well, forget, I can't print that over here. The people will eat me up alive, because there's a lot of intermarriage in Peru. And I think there's also a lot of survivors in the Holocaust there. Anyway, so he's going back and forth. On one hand, the Pratis, that's what he opened up to. On the other hand, this might create a lot of animosity and resentment to him and to his Chabad and all to his activities, and he might get into a lot of trouble. Anyway, at the end, he decided, this is what I do every week. This is Gocha Pratis, I'm going to put it in. But exactly what he was afraid of was what happened. There was a big storm, and people were talking against, how could you say such thing? This is like the Nazis, and all this was going on for about a month, he said. Like he thought, who knows what's going to happen, they'll close me down soon. Somehow or other, it calmed down, and it wasn't anymore such a big controversy. One day he gets a phone call from this girl. This is a girl that wanted to marry out, and the parents asked him to talk to her about it, and it was like talking to the wall. She wasn't interested. And she gets a phone call, she wants to meet with him. He was very surprised. Why would she want to meet with me? And she says to him as follows. She asked him, I was recently in my parents' house, even though generally, since this whole story that I want to marry this non-Jew, my parents are against it. I stopped going to the house. We're only fighting all the time. I don't go there anymore. This last time I went. And I saw this flyer on the table that you put out. And it says that whoever marries out of faith is really helping the Nazis accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. And she said, I got so angry. My blood was boiling. I took that paper and I ripped it up to shreds. Not shreds. She ripped it up. I'll tell you why I'm not saying shreds. She ripped it up. She was like so upset and so angry. How could somebody say something like that? And then she said, after a while, I said to myself, wait a second, what is he saying? Why don't you even think about it? What is he saying? And I took the piece of paper and I put them together again. I read the article again. So first of all, I want to come to ask forgiveness that I tore up, the paper that she wrote, or ask forgiveness because I tore up something that the Rebbe wrote. And the second thing I want to tell you is that I decided to discontinue this relationship. I'm only going to marry a Jew. I think this is a little bit of a similar idea. She was so sunk into her thing that there was nothing that, I'm sure the parents spoke to her, the rabbi spoke to her, gave all the reasons, all the explanations, why it's wrong, why it's not the right thing to do. It was like, she is emotionally involved with this guy. She loves him, she wants to marry him, and nothing made any difference. These harsh words shook her up. And initially she was actually so angry that she tore the thing apart to pieces. If he was standing there, he probably would have got punched in the face. But after that, it did something that she sort of that shocked her out of her, like a person who's in a trance and you wake them up. And then she started listening and looking, what does it say? And then the words were able to penetrate. So, getting back to the Maimer, let's do inside. Yesterday we read inside what it says in Tanya in chapter 20, 29. Today we'll do the Maimer, continue where the Maimer says this.
Rabbi Majeski?
Yeah.
So what's an example of something that someone could do to himself? This is all like outside people. Like if you're John in your own Teves or Kippah or whatever, like what's something that you say to yourself in that moment to you're not screaming at the wall or whatever?
That's a little bit inside. Maybe as we go through inside, we'll become smarter and think of something. Let's see.
Okay.
So let's start with the line that begins with the word Shira. It's in the booklet, it's page 6. And the line that begins with the word Shira. Middle of the line, it starts with v'yuvan. V'yuvan zeh. This will be understood. Gam came the nefesh. Before he gave an example of an animal has to be subdued. Now he's going to give a mush over Rishayim that have to be subdued. Now he says, let's apply this on a personal level, how we can all apply it to ourselves. The seichel and the meditation has an effect on the midas, on the emotions of the nefesh habahamis. This is after the nefesh habahamis is hit, the nefesh halakis. After the nefesh halakis sort of gives the nefesh habahamis a beating, nasa by bittul kloli, that causes a general sense of bittul in nefesh habahamis, and that bittul comes shabar de hargoza shal nefesh halakis. It comes through the nefesh halakis being angry at the nefesh habahamis. And why are you doing this to me? Like it says in Gemara, La'olam yargiz adam yetzer tov al yetzer hara. Where it says a person should always get his yetzer tov angry at a yetzer hara. It's a very interesting lashon. It should say the person's yetzer tov should speak to his yetzer hara. The good in me should talk to the other part in me and explain why this is wrong and why that's right and what I should do and what I shouldn't do. But it doesn't say that. It says yargiz. Yargiz comes the word regas. Beregas means anger, almost like a rage, to be enraged against your yetzer hara. Commission. What?
Sorry. Just to clarify, are we saying that yetzer hara right here is analogous with the nefesh?
Generally speaking, yeah.
Okay.
Generally speaking, yetzer hara. In Gemara and in Medrash, I don't think you'll ever find the word nefesh habahamis. Always yetzer hara. In Chassidus and Kabbalah, that's where you'll find the term nefesh habahamis, or maybe just in Chassidus. And in other words, nefesh habahamis is a deeper understanding of what the term yetzer hara. But yetzer hara is a general term that will include both. When you go into more specifics, as I mentioned yesterday, yetzer hara is more used to something which is like something bad, evil, doing an avera. Nefesh habahamis is just the animal part of me, which is really the human part of me. In some places, the nefesh habahamis is called by a different name. It's called nefesh Teves, which means the natural soul. It's not a soul that's evil. It's just natural. It's just invested into natural things, into fun, into food, into sleep, into eating, into money. These are all not evil. This is just not godly. That's all. We just had this in Tanya, was that yesterday, I think. The Alter Rebbe says the definition of klipa, and that's why we use that term in Chassidus, is sitra achra. What does sitra achra mean? And you remember? The other side. In other words, it's not saying that this is evil, it's just the other side, it's not the side of Kedusha. And by definition, that's klipa. So it says in Tanya like this, Sheyarim Allah, he should scream at him, Bekel Ram Beregas, with a thunderous call and an angry voice, the machshavta in his mind, not verbally, but in his head, Leimale says to him, Atorah, you evil one, Rasha, you wicked one, Meshuketz Mesuv Menuvel, you repulsive one, Ad Masai Tastir, and how long will you continue to conceal godliness from me? And this anger, this puts him down, and this is something which subdues. In other words, I'm using harsh language about myself. I guess this is not the normal thing to do. This is something to do only when a person sees that they're getting involved in a certain, let's say, klip, in a certain avera, and they can't pull out. And then a person has to use sort of a harsher language themselves, like what you're doing is disgusting, it's terrible. Do you realize what you're doing to yourself, what you look like? These are not words of logic explaining why it's wrong. It's more of words which are just giving the Nefesh habahamis a beating to realize how much he's damaging himself. And what does that do? It makes him more bittul. And when he's more bittul, he's more open to hear what's right and what's wrong. So you're asking, what would be a practical example? I'll tell you another story. I think it's the same idea. I still don't know what will be the example for us, but it's maybe from all the examples we'll find something that we can apply to ourselves. But this was a story that I read in a book. It's called How to Stop an Intermarriage. It's not a book of philosophy or deep thought. It's stories. This rabbi writes stories, short stories, about how he or other colleagues stopped an intermarriage. So he has one story there where he had a young man who was ready to marry. His son was not Jewish. And the parents, of course, were beside themselves, and he spoke to him, and he had hours and hours of conversations. Nothing worked. One night, he calls him up and says, could you come down to the synagogue? I'd like to speak to you. He was very respectful, so he came down. And the rabbi said, come, let's go into the sanctuary, which is the shul itself. Of course, it was the middle of the week. There's no davening at this point. It's dark. The only light that was shining, there was a little light on top of the Aron Kodesh. A lot of shuls have that. We don't have that in 770, but a lot of shuls have a little light that's called the Ner Tamid, like there's a light that's burning all the time. So he goes into the shul, and he says, Rabbi, why are we coming here? There's no services now. I'll soon explain. He walks over to the Aron Kodesh, where the Sefer Torah is. He says, take out a Torah scroll. And again, Rabbi, there's nothing, why are we taking out a Torah scroll? I'm the rabbi, just take out a Torah scroll. Okay. Then he says to him, now take the Torah scroll, throw it on the floor, and stamp on it as hard as you can. Rabbi, I'm not going to do that. Listen, I'm the rabbi. I'm telling you, you can do it. It's okay. Rabbi, with all due respect, I can't do that. Take the Torah scroll, throw it on the floor, just stamp on it as hard as you can. And he keeps saying, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. Then the rabbi says, I want you to know that by you marrying out, you're stamping on the Torah scroll much worse than when you're stamping on it with your feet. And then he woke up. What's the difference? How come all the speeches and all the conversations didn't work? Someone has to give me a good word in English that would, it's a certain impact here, a certain force. It's like a forceful way of influencing the other person. It's not logic as much as using force, but not a stick. It's the same concept. It's a figurative stick. Figurative, it's getting a beating, but it means you're saying something very forceful that's shaking up the person to realize, that there's something wrong with what they're doing. And they don't get it, but what happens is when he did that, then all the speeches he gave the weeks before suddenly started to register. So now back to Chai Rezel's question. So how can we apply this to ourselves? Again, I think it only doesn't apply on a regular basis. It only applies if someone finds that they got somehow caught up in some sort of a really not nice kind of taiva, and they can't pull out. And as much as they tell themselves this is wrong and you shouldn't be doing this and you should stop, and they see that it's just bouncing off. So he has to use some sort of a measure, something that he should shock his own Nefesh Bahamis to realize that, to sort of open up, to be able to absorb all the things that are being said and being taught about how what he's doing is wrong. Okay, maybe as we go along, we'll think of more examples. Maybe as the day goes today, something will come up. This is it. Okay, now I got it. But like I told you, many people do this avodah for others. They scream at other people, they embarrass them, they humiliate them. I have to do it. But really, this is an avodah just for me, myself, and I, all three of us. This is just engraving it from the outside. What does that mean? For example, if you have a block of wood, now you want to make it into a vessel. You have a piece of wood. You want to make a wooden bowl. How do you do that? First, I think it means, I'm not sure, it always says almost the same words without really elaborating more. I think it means if you have a log of wood and you want to make a bowl out of it, a wooden bowl, what do? First, you have to take a knife, cut it out. When you cut it out, you still don't have a bowl. Now you have this piece out of the whole log, and then you have to start cutting it out inside to make it an inside. But the first thing, you have to cut it away that you can even work with it, and then you can. So he's saying this is the same idea. The screaming or the beating, that's just to get it be that you can even work with it. And then you can start going inside with explaining and understanding that the Nefesh Bahamis should understand and comprehend that what godliness is and what the worldly pleasures are all about. The Ruchni is Dinyan Hargoza Holifa by Habitul Vachno. This avoid of Hargoza, of being angry at the Nefesh Bahamis, is to cause it to have bittul and to be subdued. That only enables it that now I can make it into a keli. Now the Nefesh starts thinking and explaining the greatness of Hashem, the beauty of Torah, the beauty of mitzvahs, and then the Nefesh Bahamis could even hear it. But that's the point, that it's this idea of bittul he's equating to digging inside the piece of wood to make it a receptacle. You understand the point? Mm-hmm. The bittul means to make a space. Initially, there's not even any space where it can go into. So it should become a keli. And then it says an interesting thing, Pirish, what does it mean? La'olam yargiz adam, a person should always do that. It's interesting, he's saying every person has something in him, some sort of an anger in him, which, of course, he has the attribute of Gevura. Everyone has Gevura. Angry at different things. You're angry at people, you're angry at situations. Every person, nobody's perfect, and everybody has in him Toiv and Ra. People have in them anger and rage. But really, this is not from a good place. So la'olam means take that anger. One of the things that Chassidus teaches us, take things that really belong to the klipa and use it to actually enhance kedusha. Take that anger. He should pour that out on the evil within him. I don't want to bring it in again, but remember I told you a story. We're talking about the idea of don't give it any substance. I was telling you about the approach of the back problem, about this doctor has this approach that it's really just coming from the brain. Remember we had this discussion? So it's very interesting. What is his shita? I didn't go into it then, but this mimer was a little bit of an interesting thing. His shita is that people have in them anger. It's totally subconscious, totally repressed. We're not aware of it absolutely. On the outside, you can feel totally calm. But deep inside, there are certain things that got you upset, and you're angry. He goes even further, saying not just angry, just a rage. And he says that that's what the brain is afraid of. This is going to come up. So when he says that, I'm just giving an example. When he says he's supposed to tell your brain, stop sending me pain as a distraction, his opinion is not just say it, but scream at your brain. That's the way he puts it. Scream at it, and he sometimes even scream verbally. I remember the first time I went to that doctor. I was on the train. And I see someone across the seat talking to themselves. I said, "Oh, maybe they're also doing the Sarno method." It was actually some homeless person who is not in order. But so when I saw this mimer, I thought it's interesting. Even in the mimer, it says people have in them subconsciously some sort of a rage. But what he's saying in the mimer is take that and use it not against another person and not against Chas v'Shalom Hashem, as some people might sometimes become that way. Use it against the klipa inside you that you're angry at it, and that what it does, it puts it down, it makes it have more bittul, And as a result of it, it weakens its position, and then it's ready to hear when you're learning and talking about Hashem's greatness. The Shabbamis is ready to accept it, to hear it. So you should be angry and say, "Farvos izer azay." In a mind, when he wants to really emphasize something, he says it in Yiddish. Why are you like that? Why are you doing this to me? Why don't you let me live? Why are you causing me to go and not allow godliness to be revealed to me? Why are you concealing godliness? And this weapon is called Allah, that's a stick or a club. To beat the Nefesh Habamis in a person. So, anyone think of anything yet? So sometimes something happens and people actually get angry at Hashem. Why does he do this? Why does he allow such a thing to happen? It happens to people all the time. So I guess what I should do is take that anger immediately and turn it around and point it to my Nefesh Habamis. Why are you making me have doubts on Hashem? What are you doing to me? Use that you're in the emotion of anger, take that emotion now, redirect it to your Nefesh Habamis. And you get two things. Number one, I get my Nefesh Habamis to listen. And number two, I'm taking away the anger, which is going in the wrong place, taking it away, and I'm redirecting it to the right place. Again, in general, Chassidus always emphasizes the positive. So we're talking about serving Hashem through learning, through understanding, through being inspired, one way, being inspired another way. But I guess when a person is in a situation where they see that Nefesh Habamis is really very emotional about certain things and I can't get it out, then you use this approach towards the Nefesh Habamis. Okay, now we're going to another weapon, which is called the spear, Remach. What's the spear? Okay, ready? V'Remach, and the spear, Ukrishma, is the Avodah of Shema. What's the connection between Remach and a spear? Which Kosab is a pasuk by Yikach Remach b'Yodei. In the Chumash, there's a story, the famous story with Pinchas, that there was a plague because there was this man who was actually head of a tribe, Zimri ben Solu, and he committed an avera with one of the women of Midian, and Pinchas killed him. But it says in the Chumash, he took a spear, and with the spear, he killed him and he killed the woman. But the Zohar says that Remach, the three letters that make up the word, is Reish Mem Ches. And Reish Mem Ches, which we know is as the amount of positive mitzvahs there are, but it's also Reish Mem Ches Teven de Krishma, is the 248 letters in the Shema. The Shema that we read has 248 letters. And the word which spells 248, the Gematria 248, Reish Mem Ches, is the same word that means a spear. So that shows us that it's connected. What does it mean? So first we know that the way the order of the davening is, the first part of the davening is called Psukkah de Zimra. If you look in the Siddur, on top of the page, it says Psukkah de Zimra, which means verses of song. And that's from the beginning until the Shema, until Yishtabach. Then we have the brachas that we're saying, which is preparing for the Shema. And then we have the actual Shema. So first has to be the word Psukkah de Zimra, which means Psukkah Zimra means song. You have it a lot of places in davening. Even the word Mizmar, what does Mizmar mean? Mizmar Shir. Mizmar means a song. Zimra. But there's another translation of the word Mizmar, and that is Lezamer Aritzim. I underline that. The Zamar Aritza means to cut the weeds. So the Zamar means to cutting weeds. What is weeds? Weeds means that in a garden, in a field, the things that are growing, there's certain things which are bad things, they grow, and it's bad for the garden or bad for the field that these things are growing, then you have to cut them out. It's called weeding the garden. So to Baruchnius, there are things we have to weed out of ourselves so that we should be able to be closer to Hashem. That is what's happening during the time of davening. L'zamar aritzim, hu asayif. That's mainly the sword that he spoke about. But Krishma is a reimach. And what's the reimach? K'meish adei reimach. Just like through a spear. Noit l'nesachayis legamrei. We take out the chayis completely from the person that's being hit with the spear. K'mekena de Krishma vatlim machrim nesara mikol v'kol. By learning Krishma and saying the Shema properly, it's a way of destroying the negative, the klipa in me completely. You take out the chayis completely. But what is the difference between what he just explained about a club, or both of them are attacking the Nefesh HaBahamis? One is attacking him with a stick. One is attacking him with a spear. What is the difference? So he says, "Ki b'midas Nefesh HaBahamis." When you talk about the midas of Nefesh HaBahamis, yesh beis bechinas. There are two categories. One is Teves heter, which is passion to physical pleasure, but they're permissible things. And the other one is called Teves isur, hanimshach merada neged, that comes from klipas neged. So a person who has a taiva for tray food, that's the first category. A person who has a taiva for food, but it's kosher food, that's the second category. That's not something which is treif, but it's still klipas nega because I'm being passionate about the food, and it's not the passion I should be having, which is towards Hashem. So the neged pchinas ha'alev, regarding the first kind of passion of the Nefesh HaBahamis, dai la'koisa b'shevet. For that, it's enough to use the stick. Shu pchinas olah, shaydei zeh nichla v'yochal hakach l'shapach l'lakus. But when it comes to the second kind of taiva, which is those permissible taivas, for that you need a sword and a spear. This has to be completely eliminated. No, sorry, I turned it around because this doesn't make any sense. That which is asur, that has to be completely eliminated. That which is permissible, I have to find a way to turn that around. I'm not destroying it. In other words, what he's saying is that not all klipa has to be destroyed. Some klipa have to be destroyed. Like even the passion. If a person, let's say, has a passion for physical pleasure, there's a story in Gemara with someone called Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan always had disagreements with someone else called Reish Lakish, which means just like there's Hillel and Shammai, or there's Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva, there's certain sages that it's like a set. They were living in the same time. They had different opinions about things. And one was always on one side, one was always on the other side. One of those two sort of pairs was Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. And Reish Lakish was about tshuva. In fact, before he became a sage, one of the Gemara sages, he was actually a criminal. And Rabbi Yochanan was traveling somewhere, and Reish Lakish jumped over a lake, and he said, "This is a holdup. Give me all your money you got." Instead of getting intimidated or frightened, he looked at him and said, "Wow, such strength! If you would use your strength in Torah, you'd become a great Torah scholar." And that's how he got him to become about tshuva. And then he married his sister, the Rabbi Yochanan's sister, and then they became both like two people who learned together. And in Gemara, very often you have these two people in Gemara having two different opinions. So what does it mean? That he had such strength before he used the strength to rob people. Now we use the strength for Torah study. And the same can be with the passion. A person has a certain passion to do something, and then if he wants to do tshuva, it doesn't mean get rid of that passion. Use that passion in a positive way. A person, let's say, was a passion for science, and as a scientist, he was an atheist and doesn't believe in Hashem. And that's the kind of life he lived. And then he wants to think of tshuva. He doesn't have to give up his knowledge of science. He doesn't have to give up the passion. He can have the passion, but now we can use that passion and that knowledge of science to actually prove Hashem, just the opposite, as many scientists have done. So there's a certain kind of nefesh habahamis. We're not out to destroy it. We're out to redirect it and transform it. There's other things where the goal is to destroy it. So that's it. The club is not there to kill. The club is to subdue. But a sword and a spear, that's actually to kill. This is shalosh klipos hatmeis, things that are actually treif, that you have to get rid of completely. Okay, so everybody will be thinking today of some sort of a practical example how this could apply to us, even though we did mention some practical things, but let's see if we can get something more real. Okay, Hatzlacha B'Kadei, everybody. I'm going to take the attendance.